you're back from Alaska.
Yes.
That's awesome. I want to hear all about it. But first, I'm sorry, I got to get this off my chest. So you remember the other week, I think maybe the last time you were here, actually, I was besieged by flies, right?
Satan flies. I remember that.
Yeah, there were Satan flies, and it was really unnerving. But I thought, like, okay, that's not too bad. But then this weekend, Mare and I spent pretty much the entire weekend having to scrub our walls. There was like this ooze, this green, sometimes red. The story kind of changes. Ooze that just kept coming down, dripping down the walls, and we were scrubbing it. It was just smearing.
That's just sort of gross, though.
Yeah,
that's sort of gross.
It is. It is kind of gross. But,
dude, I don't know what's going on there at your house, but it's you need to have it blessed or something.
You heard that?
What was
I
that?
heard it. I heard it.
And you heard it?
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah. It was
Okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy.
No, what was that,
man?
I don't know.
Just listen, if you combine that with ooze, I think you have an issue. I mean, I think that's a pretty educated opinion right now.
Let me see if I can find something. Who said we should bless the house? She said. Let me see if I can find.
We can.
Yeah, because I don't know.
I don't know how you're going to find somebody that quick, Doug.
I'm pretty good at my job, Denver.
Power!
All right.
You know what? It kind of feels better in here.
Told you, man.
Stop with the goddamn jump scares with Paula White.
You're watching and listening to The Mighty Peculiar.
Mighty Peculiar. Peculiar.
My Lord, Matt, I'm back from Alaska.
Hey,
And it's so good
back.
to be. I'm back. I didn't see any cryptids. No, I didn't. Even though my brother and I actually walked about 200 yards off the road, no Bigfoot popped out. But it's so good to be here. I'm back. But you guys have held down what's the best way to say it? You guys have held the fort in a way that just so incredible to have that kind of talent surrounding us. But man, it's good to be here. And Matt, what do we have on the plate for this week? I'm a little bit excited.
You know what? What we have
What do
this
we
week?
got? Yeah, what do we got this week?
You say plate. You could almost call this a sampler platter episode, right?
I like that.
We're talking about hoaxes, or as Denver likes to say, how would you define a hoax, Denver?
How I would define a hoax. Oh my God, put me on the spot. I would define a hoax as something that's done specifically either to make money, to actually accrue power, or to somehow get attention.
Yeah. Or, and I'm just going to quote you right back to you, a hoax is a joke, unless you're Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you guys liked that line, Denver said it before the show, and now I got to steal his best line. See how the power dynamic has shifted in this show since he's been gone?
I tell you, it's sort of crazy. I love it. But no, you're
Comes
exactly
back to
right.
Matt in charge.
Oh my gosh. Well, a hoax is a powerful thing, right? And I know that, again, we've done really fact-based, data-driven research. And a lot of people say they do their own research, which those are the people that scare the hell out of me, as you know, buddy, because a lot of times people who do their own research are researching what? A myth, a hoax, something like that, where they wrap their own fantastical fact-finding meme machine around whatever the hell that they're doing. So that's why I'm glad I got a facts-based insight individual like Matt Anderson, a facts-based data-driven producer like Doug, right, in order for us to go into these type of topics without having to guess. So I'm pretty excited about this week, and I'm excited about what you're bringing to the table on hoaxes, because I even got one myself.
Yeah. So before we start trying to pull pranks on everyone, we do need them to do something for us.
Yes, we do.
So if you're watching this on YouTube, you need to like this episode, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast, we would like you to rate and write a review of this show, preferably a positive review, but just be honest, because if you don't do it and Also, if you're not honest, we're going to send our demonic pet pig named Jody after you. And you know what? You're not going to like Jody.
Nobody wants that shit.
No one at all.
Nobody wants that. Demonic pigs. But you can cast the spirits out of pigs, but that's probably another episode. So
yes, that is.
You know,
That's another episode. So for this episode, we said hoaxes. Now that's a big topic. And as Denver said, there's different motivations. So what we've kind of done is we've chosen 3 hoaxes that we think illustrate our points best. So I'm going to kick it off with something called the Great Moon Hoax.
Okay. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah.
Surprise me.
Well, how about this? Did you know that right now on the moon, there is a vast civilization of bat-like humanoids that appear to be playing volleyball?
I didn't know that, but it makes complete sense.
Well, I guess you weren't a subscriber to the Sun newspaper in August of 1835. Because if you were, you would know that the moon is a lush paradise full of bat people that also like to fly around waterfalls. It seems like they're playing volleyball. Sometimes it looks like they're just like flipping the bird to everyone. Anyways, bat people on the moon. It was a series of 6 articles, actually, in the Sun newspaper. It ran each day for 6 days, and it was purported as the findings of like a real life astronomer. So a real life astronomer named Sir John Herschel, which is the perfect name for a real life astronomer.
It is. It is.
And the articles were purported to have been written by his protege, a guy named Dr. Andrew Grant. So over the series of 6 articles, it explained what just life on the moon was like, as viewed through the largest telescope ever, is how they made this discovery. So
their sourcing was what they actually visually observed through their large telescope at that time.
The largest telescope man has ever, not seen, because it broke and then you can't see it.
So they observed these bat creatures playing tennis or whatever the hell you got on there. All of a sudden, though, after they observe these creatures and they report on it through the press or the complicit media.
Yep.
So all of a sudden their telescope broke.
Yeah, it's like a Mission Impossible thing. It had like 60 seconds and then it self-destructed, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, so sort of like when people say that I think I have a parallel here. So you like people who say that they get golden plates, or that they have some special plates that they translate and then it's taken back up into heaven by gods or angels, or whether it's Christianity or offshoots of Christianity or Islam, or you're talking about some other things. As you know, I know about the Voyagers and the CDD plates from the harmonic universes that were automatically taken up after they were translated. It seems to me it's pretty interesting how these incredible discoveries can't be validated after they're done through observation.
You're right. Or, you know what? It's even kind of like how no matter how good our cameras and technology get, every picture of a ghost is blurry.
And a Bigfoot.
Or Bigfoot, yeah, or anything, right? It's like, so obviously, the moon is not populated with bat people. I'm sorry to break the news to everyone here now that I've gotten your hopes up. This was 100% a hoax run by this newspaper called The Sun. Since The Sun had only been around for 2 years, they really needed to make a name for themselves in this crowded marketplace, right? And what better way to do it than just to make up the news, like literal fake news. We've got it. We found it. It's fake news.
Fake news with 19th century clickbait, as we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Were these people real? Was Sir Heatherton real? What was his name again?
Yeah, Sir John Herschel.
When
you say it, you actually have to do for the audio only listeners, you're going to miss this, but when you pronounce Sir John Herschel, when you say Herschel, you really need to like grow a little bit.
Sort of like Stewie pronouncing his WHs.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's like from a family. So Sir John Herschel.
There's a yes.
Sir John Herschel.
Yes. So he was real.
Herschel. Yes.
He was a real astronomer of note. Again, at the time, the thing is, like, his name would mean something to a decent segment of the public. And I guess this is where we really need to point out what the game that the Sun was playing here by saying this was all real, but in attributing it to real people is information didn't travel fast. So Sir John Herschel and Dr. Andrew Grant, his protege, who is the one that they credit as writing the actual articles, they are over in England. So the chances that word is going to get to them that their names are being used to validate this story, the story's going to be done by the time that news would ever reach them. So that's kind of impossible now. Like that's almost like this whole story feels very antiquated in some ways, but really the only real like relic of the past here is the fact that they had time to do this. Because now you invoke someone's name and make up a quote about them, they're going to get that. The news is going to get to them before you have a chance to really pull off your hoax.
So these two cats. So what you're telling me, Matt, is that Sir Herschel and Grant,
yes,
did not know that this crazy bat people moon volleyball dance was actually being reported on by this newspaper.
Right. They had no idea, because the actual writer of this is Richard Adam Locke, which is a perfect 1800s name. Richard Adam Locke, who was a staffer at the Sun. He wrote it. All of it. Just himself.
So Dick Locke wrote it.
Dick Locke. Yep. Yes.
So Dick wrote it. Dick Locke wrote it about Sir Herschel and Grant.
Yes, exactly. Now, what's interesting here for me is the fact that while there was no standard saying that he couldn't do this, right? The problem comes, Locke must have foreseen some controversy, because the other thing they tried to do is insulate the paper from the criticisms by saying that these articles were originally published in the Edinburgh Journal of Science. So you can't blame the Sun for the content. All they are doing is reprinting them.
Now, I do blame.
Again, that's not true, but that's what they said, right?
No, exactly. But what's amazing is that the plausible deniability strategy for hoaxsters and fraudsters and grifters is a pretty amazing thing. So if you think about even today, and I know we like to translate this to today, but if you're looking at, say, for instance, white vans burning ballots for Stop the Steal when the election was stolen, obviously from Donald Trump, when you're talking about Italian satellites, when you're talking about the NSA actually injecting the ability to change votes by injecting code through something called Hammer Scorecard, all this stuff comes from supposed experts, right? You're talking about Hammer Scorecard was a 3-star general named Thomas McInerney. You're talking about there's observers, election observers who saw the white vans, in the votes. You're talking about Italian satellites. There's technical individuals saying that Italian satellites are manipulating votes. You're talking about Antrim County. You're talking about groups that are saying that, votes are being pushed through Chinese servers because they have trace routing. It always goes back to there's always layers of plausible deniability. So it's no surprise to me, even in 1835, right, that Dick Locke, would, have some kind of plausible deniability on Sir Heather and Grant.
Herschel?
Sir Herschel. I'm sorry, Sir Herschel. Heather. I don't know why I said Sir Heather. I don't know what's going on, but Sir Herschel and Mr. Grant. So anyway, that's why this story is so fascinating to me, that, bat people on the moon captured people in a way that was very exciting to them.
That brings up another interesting point, is the public by and large seem to accept this as fact. They took the word of the paper, because this is not, it's again, never want to oversimplify, but this was a time when people trusted what they read. There wasn't enough media literacy in general to understand that what was printed wasn't true, right? Most people,
of course, and it's the same today. I mean,
it's
let's
exactly
be honest.
the same today. Yeah.
Dick Locke is no different from writers at the New York Post or the Washington Examiner,
Right.
or at some points on the far left, like Vox, me on Bigfoot erotica, right? There's, so you have these same clickbaity type of non-moral compass, lack of integrity, purposeful cynicism, and lying, right? That pushes this stuff out into the media sphere, and then it becomes accepted. So what's interesting to me is that there were people living, say, the year after in 1836, sitting around their fire, right, while they're cooking up some victuals. I don't know.
Good.
And they're talking about bat people on the moon, batting around a ball, which leads me to believe that this is where the idea for Batman comes from. I think maybe it was me, but I'm kidding.
Is this where batshit crazy comes from?
Batshit crazy could go, oh my God, but, of course we're postulating, but it is incredible to me that in 1835, if I would have read about the moon and that there's bat people up there in a lush environment that's batting around a ball, that sounds pretty cool to me.
Yeah.
That's a supernatural. And why wouldn't I believe, right? If I believe that God's talking to me directly, or I'm praying, over the sheep herd, I think that, it's not a big deal. And I think that's the irresponsibility of the media and that complicity, right, to value clicks or views or money over really reporting to the public. And that's just something we have to deal with. And I think that's why, again, this show is so important, why we talk about how history can translate to today. And I think that's just really important as we go through these stories.
This all worked for what the Sun needed. Circulation went up. Like, exact sales figures are not easy to come by, but it seems like it doubled and or quadrupled the circulation while this was happening, and it sustained. So even after the revelation that this was a hoax, which was kind of a slow rolling revelation, which is funny, they didn't come out and admit it for several weeks, and then when they did, there was like, okay, we thought what we were reporting was true. And then it was satire.
Or here's the thing, man. Once you put something out into the environment, especially when it comes to media, even if there's a backtrack or there's a revelation in the future, doesn't mean that the deep state or somebody isn't covering up the actual truth.
And they never printed an actual retraction. So
there you go. I'm telling you, once people, it's almost like, you put your teeth into a good piece of meat, and they say, well, that's beyond meat.
Right.
You're like, well, but I think once they get their mouth into it, their teeth into it, no matter what you tell them, that's something that's going to stick with them and meme with them, unless they have the ability for critical thought after the fact.
A quote that has been attributed to Dick Locke that I love is that he underestimated the gullibility of the American people. That was part of his, it was satire defense. But one interesting piece of their legacy is because this bat people story put them on the map. They were around in 1897 to publish an editorial that was called, "Is There a Santa Claus?" And that editorial ended with a very famous line: "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus." The Sun is who published that. And had they not published the Bat People story 2 years into their run, they might not have been financially stable enough to last until then, which might have deprived us of Miracle on 34th Street. So there you go.
Unbelievable. I mean, that's the kind of thing, for me, that I think people get out of this is that, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, comes from the bat people on the moon batting around the volleyball in lush green forest.
Which shows they learned nothing.
Well, not only did they learn nothing, the sad part is that we're the show that says there isn't a Santa Claus.
I know. We're
and I think that's what's so important about this. And, it's funny, if I may segue on media complicity, there is something that I do know about when it comes to hoaxes. And I know this is going to surprise you, Matt, and I'm sure Doug listening is going to be just shocked when I tell you this. But I have to tell you that I believe I can prove that the whole Bigfoot phenomenon here in the United States started with a hoax.
What?
Yes. So that we've had these discussions before,
Consider
man.
me
1947
skeptical.
Ross. Yeah, I know it's tough to believe, but we talk about the UFO sightings exploding in 1947 or after 1947 in Roswell. We've talked about Joseph Campbell and the memeing of certain things in society that are supposedly true, which we know are not really when you look at empirical evidence, but people automatically latch onto it. Do you know, and I'm asking you questions, right? Do you know what the center of the Bigfoot universe is in the United States? If there was one town, do you know what the center of the universe is for Bigfoot research in the United States?
So every instinct in me wants to say it's like somewhere in like Tennessee and Kentucky and stuff like that. But I believe I'm just geographically so far off that no, I can't even guess.
I think a lot of people would think Washington or Oregon, right? The Pacific Northwest is sort of the bloom for Bigfoot. Close. It's Northern California in the town of Willow Creek in Humboldt County.
Hey,
California.
okay. I know that from the Bobcat Goldthwait movie. Willow Creek.
There you go, my friend. So there you go. Exactly. Right. And you're like, well, God, why? Why? I mean, you're talking about in 1967, the famous Patterson-Gimlin film was actually filmed in Six Rivers National Forest in Humboldt County, very close to Willow Creek, right at Bluff Creek. And you're like, well, that's pretty interesting. Bluff Creek is very famous, right? Yeah. As in Humboldt County is where that actually began. But Willow Creek, which is very close to that, is where a lot of the Bigfoot researchers actually gathered to start their investigation into the massive, wilderness area of the Six Rivers National Forest. But there's also another reason that they started in Humboldt County. And that's because, my friend, in 1958, loggers, the Six Rivers National Forest, found Bigfoot tracks.
Okay. So they are out doing their work. They're logging.
Doing their work, and they stumble upon these massive Bigfoot tracks that were perfectly preserved, on the roads and along the riverbank.
So how big are we saying? So like they're seeing footprints. So, and they have to be standing out to them. So.
18 inches, my friend.
Okay. So
yeah. So you're talking about a pretty large creature, right? If you're talking about an 18-inch five-toed creature, you're talking about 1.5 Shaquille O'Neals, right? So, you're talking about, a pretty large, creature walking through there. The guy who found it, the picture that you have, and I'm sure our amazing producer will have this, is Jerry Crew, and he's holding up a picture of the cast of the Bigfoot print. Yes. And it starts an explosion of Bigfoot sightings in 1958. So now you're talking in Humboldt County, Six Rivers National Forest.
Can I ask one quick question? Is this where the term Bigfoot comes from?
Actually, the actual term Bigfoot comes from a 1958 article run by the Humboldt Times, the newspaper.
Because literally the guy's holding a Bigfoot. So that's like where we get the actual term.
It's the incredible intelligence of Americans to be able to name things in a literal way. The thing that I had sent you, which I think is pretty exciting, and why that I wanted to talk about this today, is we can automatically say that Jerry Crew was the one who actually started this because he found the Bigfoot. He did all that kind of stuff. And I had actually written down the name of the reporter. I think I sent it to you and Doug. The reporter, daggone it, I had it all in my notes because I'm not as good as you, I guess, as going through this over and over again. But I'm about to bring up why that when I talk about complicity in the media, when I talk about the media being part of this, I think that's why this is so important. Because Jerry Crew, when you're talking about a report coming from the Humboldt Times, right? The Humboldt County newspaper saying that a Bigfoot has been found, Bigfoot tracks caused a national sensation, Matt.
Right.
So you're talking about one reporter, right, who writes this up in the Humboldt County Times or the Humboldt Times named Andrew Gonzoli. Okay. This individual writes it even though he has a notion that it's probably not real.
Okay. So
probably not real. And how do I know this? Because the editor's wife, when he died 5 decades later, said that they knew that it was faked. And they even knew at that time that it was a guy named Ray Wallace. And Ray Wallace, who died, I think, in the 1990s or maybe in the early 2000s. 2002, right? He was 84, I think. Yeah. It was that point that he said that he faked them. And that we know that Ray Wallace actually did that. So you're like, well, Den, mean, how does this all, you're talking about 1958. This is when the term Bigfoot actually originated. You're talking about a national story based on an area that is really squatchy, right? If you're talking about, the Pacific Northwest, right? And you're talking about Northern California.
I know I have to dress warmly when it's really squatchy out.
Yes, right. You got to dress warmly. So you have all this happening right now. But tell me why then, my friend, why do the sightings really explode in 1958, 1959 around Willow Creek, Bluff Creek, and the Six Rivers National Forest? It's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now that we know in hindsight that it was faked, and we probably know that the reporters and the editors knew it was faked, they still printed it. And when you're talking about Dick Lock, right, with the first story that you did, now you're talking about Gonzoli, you have a complicit way that the media can actually spread hoaxes.
Yes.
Those hoaxes can be embraced not just by the local populace, but nationally. Because right now, when you look at what Bigfoot is, it is a national phenomenon. It is a moneymaker for so many people. So now let's skip forward. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was going to say, so I follow-up question, but based on what you were saying, so looking up Ray Wallace, right? One thing that I found interesting was, and this is from the Wikipedia entry on him, but I just I liked their wording. The opening line for Ray Wallace's Wikipedia is American amateur Bigfoot hoaxer, which led me to believe that so there's non-amateur Bigfoot hoaxers, but then I realized that they're probably just, I guess that's probably the whole Finding Bigfoot cast is like I said, they've risen to it. They've made hoaxing professional.
Because now, even when you tell people that it's a hoax, it's like, well, the Native American mythology says that there's Bigfoot. So even if that's a hoax, it doesn't take away what happened in 1967. Right. Now, you're like, Jesus, Dan. So by 1958, 59, there's a guy named Bob Titmus who had come into, sort of one of the major Bigfoot researchers that based himself out of Willow Creek. Do you know who his friend was? Jerry Crew.
The person who finds the
hoaxed Bigfoot print. So now Bob Titmus, right, is now rolling through this Bigfoot research based on these footprints that are hoaxed because his friend happened to be Jerry Crew. Now, when you're looking at this whole area, so Willow Creek, Bluff Creek, Six Rivers National Forest, Humboldt County becomes the national world center, the epicenter of Bigfoot discovery. Yeah. So you're thinking, well, Den, how about the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967? Right. Now, right, we have the Patterson-Gimlin film. We have Bigfoot. We have Patty walking across here. And there's, I know a lot about this. Yes. So in 1967, where was that actual film taken? Where was that film taken, Matt? Can you make a guess where the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film was actually taken?
Somewhere in the Bluff to Willow to whatever region.
Isn't that amazing? Humboldt County. Man. Right? So you got Humboldt County now, where in 1967 the Patterson-Gimlin film is shot based on the evidence of Bigfoot being in that area. What is the evidence
of Bigfoot being in that area was?
A hoax. So now you have a 9-year period of a bloom of Bigfoot activity. A lot of people say, go ahead, Matt.
Okay. So we know who found it. We know who the supposed expert was in the area. So Ray Wallace is credited as the person who actually creates the footprint, right?
Yes.
Where is he in this? Is this a coordinated plan, or was he kind of like a trickster that wanted to put the footprint there and was hoping someone would find it? Is he working with Jerry Crews and stuff to do this whole thing? Or
you look at the population in the 60s of Humboldt County. I mean, you have, here's what was happening at the time. You had people in the logging company were saying that they had weird things happening. People were messing with their tractors, or they had odd noises, or they had things messing with their implements. So I think, when you're a Ray Wallace, or you're a prankster, or you're a fun guy, my guess is you're like, damn, this is funny. Maybe we can use something. There's a Bigfoot, right? There's a creature, and I'm going to make some fake Bigfoot prints. And you're like, well, Den, was there some kind of meme then already through mythology or through people who said they saw hairy creatures? Maybe.
Yeah.
But we know that it was isolated. There wasn't a whole lot of Bigfoot stuff going on pre-1958. So what's interesting to me is that I think you had a guy, opportunistic guy, a fun person maybe, who could keep a hell of a secret, goes out and plants footprints. The issue that you have is an opportunistic hoax can turn into a major moneymaker for grifters and the cynics of this world. And, so it's amazing to me. Listen, people are like, Denver, you can never 100% know that the Patterson-Gimlin film was faked. But I welcome everybody to go look at the timeline from the hoax to 1967. Then you want to look at the folk monster, right? The Legend of Boggy Creek, which really exploded it. But there was actually a show in 1976, Matt, called In Search of Bigfoot. Now, it wasn't with Leonard Nimoy. It's actually a full-length film.
Okay.
And actually, everything after today mirrors the way that they filmed that.
So basically, they created the template off of all the stuff that we just talked about, and then that's the strike plate or whatever, the thing that like now everything from that is copied.
The financial strike plate for Bigfoot grifter started in 1958 and was perfected by 1976. And I'll tell you this, 1967, the Patterson-Gimlin film was really the explosion based on Ray Wallace. So there's really two people who created this. We can talk about the Bob Titmuses and the John Greens and all the famous Bigfoot researchers. We can talk about the Finding Bigfoot Today and all the Bigfoot research organizations. Really, the people who started this is Ray Wallace, the hoaxer, and our intrepid reporter from the Humboldt Times. That's it. That is your creation of what we have today in Bigfoot mythology.
So good.
And it's why when I talk to people about this, when you look at the geographic spatial issue of this, when you're looking at sourcing and proof, what does the lineage look like from a hoax to the point that it actually wins, right? When it actually wins over the American people through memeing. It's just like what you talked about with the sun. When you're talking about bat people playing on the moon all the way through 97 or 98, when they said that, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, memed. When you're talking about what we've done here, we have a meme that we cannot shake from the American public because we had a guy who wanted to walk around and do it. We had a person that also was willing to report on it, even though there was no credible sourcing at all, except for one guy, Jerry Crew, holding up a Bigfoot that was perfectly formed. It's so ludicrous.
Right.
It's so out of bounds. Yet right now, we now have this actually exploding into spiritual Bigfoots, interstellar Bigfoots, Bigfoots with orbs, obviously the Native American mythology. Then you have the biological entity believers like the Patterson-Gimlin film and Patty, but now you have sub-belief systems on that. Some have infrasound. Some can give you terror, right? Some can't be seen in infrared. Some can actually cover up, what they are, their micron levels, so you can't see them with thermals. All this stuff has erupted from one jokester on a riverbank in 1958.
And all of that stuff is just like cover for holes in the story. Like that's the best part about it, right? It's like because the stupid footprint is so obviously fake, every bit of mythology that's added is really just in order to cover like how dumb it looks. Like, so why does it look like that? Well, because you wouldn't understand like the composition of the body. Or okay, then why can't like we get a good picture of it? Well, because like it in its fur is like blurring effects to technology. It's like all it is just adding on cover your ass stuff, basically, right?
So what's amazing about this, is that when you're talking about these Bigfoot theories, these grifter Bigfoot theories, I was watching a show the other night, say how far it went, where they said that all Bigfoot people who don't believe in Bigfoot are probably psychotic, right? Or don't have open minds, right? And these are the kind of people that are automatically skeptics in a bad faith kind of way.
Right.
And here's what I want to say. The whole Bigfoot phenomenon started in a bad faith way.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, right? Because of this Bigfoot hoax in 1958, I was watching a show that's very recent where a buddy of mine is on there, my Bigfoot screamer friend, Mel Scahan. So I'm watching this Bigfoot thing when they're talking about us, non-believers being possibly psychotic. And we had an individual talk about the National Forest Service, the actual conspiracy theory that they're hiding Bigfoot because they don't want it to be on the extinct species list.
Endangered species list, like
the endangered species list, because that would actually stop business or logging if they did put them on the endangered species list, and the government doesn't want to get a bit of the business plan of these massive companies, and that the American people aren't prepared to actually accept Bigfoot as a being because people would be out there hunting and everybody trying to kill them. It sounds like a freaking Bugs Bunny cartoon, right? With Elmer Fudd out there tracking Bigfoot.
Suddenly the American populace is a bunch of Elmer Fudds like going around trying to.
Just because Bigfoot has been identified as being real, we're going to have people going in the woods trying, like a massive amount.
You know what? Okay, look. It is true. Bigfoot has the ability to take a rifle and tie it into a knot or a bow, so that way if you try and shoot it, it will blow back on you. That's exactly right. A proven fact about Bigfoot.
And he can do it with his mind.
Sure.
So he doesn't even need to put his hands on you.
He can also make you not understand which is it, if it's duck or rabbit season. He can really confuse you that way. He's mental trickery.
Since Bigfoot isn't in the actual hunting guide with bag limits, I don't know. I think you can kill them just like you kill rabbits. Sure. But here's the other thing too, and I want to end with this because I know this is so exciting for me to talk about hoaxes, whether it's Batman on the moon or a Bigfoot on a riverbed. When I'm watching these shows from 1976 all the way through to today, there's one thing that I just want to share with people before in a simple way, before we move on. It's this: if you have a human being in the woods who finds a Bigfoot track and they say, my God, it's impossible to be hoaxed because humans wouldn't be here, they're there.
Yeah. Yep.
The human that found the track is there. So to say it's impossible for humans not to be there,
right,
is really interesting because they're there.
Yes. There's there.
The human's there. So not to be completely literal, but that would actually mean that other humans could have been there, or that humans are there.
Right.
It also could mean this, and I hate to break this to people, and I hope they're ready for this. It's possible that since they're there, they put the print there.
Right. Yeah. That maybe they found it because they put it there. Yeah.
Also, and I know this is literal, it also means that how many people have been there in the past? Because if they've thought about going there,
right,
in a population of 300 plus million people in the United States, my guess is other people did.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to tell folks is that when you're looking at sourcing and people and what they're telling you, you always want to go all the way back to the beginning, whether it's hoaxes, whether it's these type of things. And just remember, Ray Wallace is laughing in his grave right now because we have tens of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars that have been run through the Bigfoot ecosystem, the economic ecosystem. So again, Stop the Steal wasn't real.
Bigfoot put his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. His big feet.
Absolutely. So I know that was fast. Let's go.
No.
Let's rock.
Well, so there's a couple threads I want to pick up on because you said a couple things that I actually think fit really perfectly. One, the idea of Bigfoot started in bad faith, right? Yes. And the idea that in order to usually understand the repercussions of a hoax, you need to go back to that, either the hoax itself or whatever the underlying event was that spawns the hoax. So for this part, we need to now go to New York, back to New York, actually, but now we are in 1974 and we are in a town called Amityville. And I think a lot of people know where this is going to a degree. So the Amityville Horror is what we're talking about here, really. Everyone knows the basic premise of like, it's this haunted house that this family moved into and only lived in there for 28 days. And then they fled because it was so terrifying and yada, yada, all that stuff. Right. What's less talked about and is actually kind of used as just like a footnote is the actual tragedy that happened in that house prior to the events of the Amityville Horror, which was on November 13th, 1974. A guy named Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family. He murdered his mom and dad, his 4 younger siblings. That's real. That's undisputed. That happened, right?
That's the underlying fact.
It's that house, 112 Ocean Avenue, right? So already horrible. And you know what? In fairness to like, we sometimes talk about like how it's weird the threads that people pick up on as the like what they want to exploit to either become a conspiracy or to make a story. Like there's weird stuff around the actual murders that you don't even need to get into the paranormal for. Like the fact is like, he shot each one of his family members in bed with like a Marlin hunting rifle. So one of the lingering questions about this whole the murders is why no one heard it. Like, again, he's going from room to room. He's got to go to 3 separate bedrooms that are separated by 2 floors in this house. And he is firing 1 to 2 times in each person. So,
well, I mean, the question for me, somebody who knows a little bit about firearms is you have a Marlin, right? Are you talking about a 22 caliber? Are you talking about a 30-30? My grandfather had a 30-30 and a 35, right, caliber Marlin.
And that's the one.
Lever action. Right, that's the model, 35 caliber. And when I hunted with lever action Marlin, it's not as loud as you might think. And the other thing I would look at if I was a police investigator, I would say, okay, for instance, if you look at my house here, it's very well insulated, right? It's incredibly insulated. If you're talking about a house that size, or you're talking about people sleeping in the dead of night.
Yeah.
I mean,
roughly about 3 a.m. is what they're
3
saying.
a.m.
3 to 4 a.m.
Listen, I've shot a deer, no kidding, right next to the house. I would say within 20 to 30 yards with my wife sitting in the living room and not hearing it. So you're talking about, when you're talking about that time of the morning, it depends on how fast they're moving too. Yeah. Because they might still be laying in bed, but they're going to be disoriented. So the first thing I would look at is the caliber. I would actually redo the shots within each room. Yeah. I would actually do the timing on how fast he moved from room to room. Because if I'm using a lever action, Matt, I can move incredibly fast. You're talking about if I'm within 5 feet of the victim, boom, boom, they're disoriented.
Yeah, no, he was very close. Like, I think the furthest he stood away was for the parents. Otherwise, the horrible thing is he literally just goes like almost point blank range to some of the younger ones. So
that's the thing. Also, if he's in point blank range or he's actually putting it against the body, that's going to muffle the sound. I hate to be so brutal.
No,
but there's a thing that you want to go through the investigative techniques before you think that somehow demons had put demon earplugs in their ears while they're getting killed.
Okay, so let's put it this way. DeFeo first thinks it was a mob hit because like there was some shady stuff with the right. And like their finances, like how they could afford the house they lived in, right? But it becomes quickly understood that he did it. His story keeps changing. He actually gets into he's first taken into police custody as protective custody because they do think there's something to this idea that like the only reason why he was spared was like he claimed to have not been in the house at the time, right? But his story is just rapidly changing, kind of unprompted. Like he just can't keep it straight because he was known to be a frequent abuser of drugs, unstable, an alcoholic, all of this stuff, right?
Okay.
And had a very, very unstable relationship with his father specifically, but seemed like maybe just with the family in general, right? So again, that's all the true stuff. And he is arrested then properly for the murders. He is put on trial. The trial goes from it starts in October 1975, so just shy of a year later. It runs for 6 weeks, and he's convicted. During the trial, his court-appointed attorney, William Weber, and that guy is where we're going to spend a lot of time with William Weber. But so he's the court-appointed attorney. He tries a few different defenses. Honestly, he feels like he's kind of like improvising his defense strategy during the trial, because it's a lot of like, well, yeah, like, of course he did it, but you can't convict him because he was, he tries the insanity defense. He tries. And he will bring up the idea that like he was hearing voices. Now, what's key is he was hearing voices in terms of the insanity plea, not necessarily he was hearing demonic voices. Doesn't matter. Jury's not convinced. This guy seems to totally know what he did, and he did it. So he's convicted in November of 1975, and he's going to serve life in jail. In December of 1975, a couple named George and Kathy Lutz and their children move in to 112 Ocean Avenue. They get the house at a crazy bargain because obviously a whole family was murdered there. Yeah. And they proceed to stay for 28 days, and then they flee in terror because of how horrible everything was. I always love this. They try to hang a lot of credibility on like, look, we just fled. We didn't take any of our stuff. Well, they didn't need more than like one rental truck to move into this house, because what came with the purchase of the house was all of the DeFeo furniture.
So I know that people might think that's a minor point. That's a major point in this.
Because then they're basically, when they're fleeing, leaving everything behind, what they're saying is they just didn't take all their clothes. And we don't even know that they didn't necessarily.
We don't. Exactly right.
The furniture wasn't theirs to begin with. I hope they got new mattresses.
Exactly. That's a good point.
But, okay, so they flee 28 days in the house, right?
Okay.
So that was December 1975. Well, in January 1976, the Lutzes meet William Weber, the attorney for the convicted family annihilator, Ronald DeFeo Jr. And they proceed to sit in William Weber's office with a guy named Paul Hoffman, who's an author. And the four of them, over multiple bottles of wine, come up with a story of what happened. And what William Weber does is he uses actual like things that he knew in preparing DeFeo's defense about like weird details about the house, like the idea that like a neighborhood cat would frequently come and sit perched in a window. And if the lighting was right or whatever, it would look like glowing eyes staring in at you. Guess what the neighborhood stray cat that sat in a windowsill became? The demonic pig Jody, which if you've ever seen Amityville Horror, there's this interesting thing where like the youngest daughter has this imaginary friend named Jody that also turns out to be a demon pig for reasons. And another thing that they will say like, well, of course we didn't fake this because like people say like, oh, we were financially strapped and we couldn't afford the house. Well, we were only in it for 28 days. We couldn't get behind on our mortgage. Well, right. But the thing is, like, what you can find out in that time is you bit off more than you could chew. Like, even though the house was at a discounted rate, Kathy did not work outside of raising the family. George owned his own, like, land surveying business, which was, like, to varying degrees of, like, moderately successful, but not huge. And in making the purchase of the house, they are rationalizing it, even at its discounted rate. He owns a speedboat, and he's been paying to have it docked and renting dock space. Well, this house comes with a boathouse, so now I won't have to pay that. Well, this house is big enough so I can close down my rental office and I can move my work stuff here so I can save on rent. So before they move in, they're already realizing that they need to do some creative accounting to afford this house. So they leave after 28 days. Now, yes, they were not technically behind on any payments, but I'm sure the writing was on the wall, not the ooze. Right.
If you're talking about financial issues, which seems to be one way or the other, seems to always be part of hoaxes, myths, people trying to get out of bad situations. Was there ever where the Amityville Horror, was it ever where you have an author? Was there ever any newspaper or media before that movie or before that sort of book came out? Or was this like a phenomenon from the book that just sort of exploded?
So what they did is they kind of did a little bit of a semi-real-time like press push. So in 1976, January is where the story is concocted. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why we know a lot of like this element of it is because hoaxers betray each other a lot. Well, so after this whole story is conceived, right, between Weber, his writing partner, and then the Lutzes. So they come up with the story. Then in March of 76, they try and solidify this with a contract to write a book. Because, and we'll circle back to this for a second, but the reason, we're going to circle back to Weber's motivations, because that is where I find is the heart of this story. But like, just so we know the timeline here, in March, Weber tries to solidify this agreement. They're all going to profit share based on like it was like they had even had a title for it. It was like the devil house or something. It was, stupid. Well, the Lutzes were like, you know what? We think we can get a better deal. So they back out. They don't sign that contract with Weber, and they go sign with a guy named Jay Anson, who is the author of the Amityville Horror. So Weber gets cut out of all of everything that comes after, which pisses Weber off. So he's like the one who basically says, like, as soon as Amityville Horror, the book comes out, which is in 1977, and then the movie with James Brolin and Margot Kidder comes out in 79. At every turn, Weber is like, yeah, we met in my office, drank a ton of wine, and came up with the story. I know it's a hoax because I helped create it. And he has the details, like we took real events that I knew from the DeFeo defense, and we figured out how to transpose those things that I knew into like haunting sounding stuff. So cat becomes demon pig. So
it's great.
And what's even better is, like I said, all this lead up, like the Lutzes are trying to build the mystique around the house. So they do the normal stuff, which is like get Ed and Lorraine Warren and varying people of note in the paranormal world to come investigate the house. They try and make it seem like they pay for this house and they leave it like empty for a long time. They don't want to let anyone move in. That's not true. They basically sign it over back to the bank within months. So they don't pay, and then they sign it back over. But in that little bit of time, they do have they're trying to drum up, some interest. And, you can always trust Ed and Lorraine Warren to like turn anything from like a non-issue into like full-blown demon attack.
Bullshit.
So what ends up, okay. So, and just, you were talking earlier about like how like provably false the Bigfoot stuff was. Well, the Amityville is like, that almost puts the Bigfoot footprint that Ray Wallace made, that almost makes that look like a masterful deception. Because like in the Amityville Horror book, frequently what's happening is like windows are getting like blown out, doors are blown off the hinges, all of this stuff, right? I mean, it sounds like major repair work needs to be done constantly because this house is just destroying itself. Well, people moved in, before the book came out, and then their house was swarmed with people being like, I got to go see the evil house that I read about, or I'm seeing this movie about. That family wanted nothing to do with the press, but they did let one team come in just to kind of like put their final stamp. And they had people check the hardware, like on the hinges on the doors, the locks on the windows. All of it was original to the house being built. No repairs were done, which means all of those claims in the book, all of that epic stuff, like, can you believe this weird wind just came and blew our front door off the hinge? No, none of that. It's just provably did not happen. Okay.
Matt, do you think part of this, and I'm not trying to oversimplify things. We talk about the financial. There's, first of all, you have really explained well the interlocking financial motives of multiple individuals, attorneys, writers, and a family.
And
right?
there's one more motive I just want to interject that I think is but go ahead. Sorry.
But the baseline, and I can't wait to hear that. But I think what I've done in the counterterrorism field, with our life experiences, when you talk about me, you and Doug, our combined age is what? Really effing old, right? We're getting up there, right? 106, me and Doug alone are over 100
You guys
years
are leading
old,
the charge. I'm bringing up.
Right. So, right. But do you think that, I guess, not only from my past, but solidified by the J6 lies on the deposition, solidified by people who will lie to your face no matter what for financial means, people that will lie to your face for power. Yeah. Anybody from the Vivek Ramaswamis to the Mark Meadows, who seems to be the Weber of the Amityville case, based on him,
yes, that's
showing his belly and being angry. Yeah. So are people just not used to this concept I'm about to tell you, that people lie? I guess maybe it's the way that I have been trained, raised, the way that my religious upbringing, what I've done as far as investigative work, targeting, running companies, going through HR, knowing that people will lie to get out of anything. I think there's almost this credulity in the American public to believe things that are so bizarre on its face that you think it's too effed up to be made up, but actually it's an amazing strain of grifter. Yeah. That has no moral compass whatsoever. And
it brings up that like phrase that is said a lot, and I'm guilty of saying it too, but really we should probably strike from our like vernacular, is you couldn't make this up if you tried, right? Like, I know we want to say that kind of stuff because of how like unbelievable something is, but like the point is like, no, you can, and people have. So like,
and provably so.
Yes.
Matt, provably so.
Yeah.
Like ones and zeros, data specific research, documentation, facts-based insights, going back to people who self-identified of doing it, like the Webers of the world, right? And the fact that there's no proof after the fact of actions that people said were taken or things that happened to them, where the proof is so not there that it's not just an 80 or 90% certainty that those events didn't happen, but it's a 99.9% certainty that those events didn't happen. And that's what's so amazing about our three stories here, is that we have the supernatural, right, beings. We have aliens, Bigfoot, and ghosts that we've provably said in these specific instances were started by hoaxes that actually have metastasized.
Yes. I mean, again, and there's no shortage. I mean, people still mine the Amityville stuff to this day. I mean, one, it's public domain in the sense that you can call anything Amityville, whatever, and just make a movie that loosely ties to this event. So it's worth pointing out, and then I want to circle back to Weber, but like, it is worth pointing out that much like you said with Bigfoot, how like the idea of like, here's the template, here's the strike plate of the mythology, and then everything that's added after the fact is kind of in order to cover up weak spots in the story. Always. Well, why has no one that has lived subsequently in 112 Ocean Avenue ever had a problem with anything paranormal? Well, that's simple, because guess what? It actually attached itself to the Lutzes. So when the Lutzes fled, they took it with them. So their grift can continue, because now they're haunted wherever they go. And that explains why the house no longer is. Of course, that only comes after the fact. They never try to say that until it suddenly becomes like, until like the current owners of the house like start doing the press saying like, none of this happened. Like, we're fine. Like, This house has a tragic, like the people that ended up living in the house for like I think a decade or a decade and a half after the Lutzes basically said it was someone actually that lived in the neighborhood growing up and bought the house basically because it's like, we want to make this place a happy home again. Like we're tired of it being either the scene of tragedy with the DeFeo murders or like exploitation with the Lutzes. So their whole point was, we're going to live here and raise our family to reincorporate this house back into just the neighborhood, to the point that the house is unrecognizable now. I think shifted it on the land. They've taken out the windows that look like eyes looking down at you. So the house is fine. It's always been fine.
It's always been fine. There's never, ever been an issue in that house, well, except for the multiple murders.
But again, not a supernatural thing. So here's where I want to like really just linger and focus in on Weber's motive, right? Because George and Kathy Lutz, they're basically just looking for an easy paycheck, right? They're looking to sell a story. It's wrong, but like, you get it. That's standard issue hoaxing, essentially, right? Hoaxing motive, right? With Weber, there's definitely the payday because he is trying to write a book, and there is the self-aggrandizement. He is the one who represented in court Ronald DeFeo Jr. The thing is, what he's also doing is trying to see if he can, after the fact, get a new trial for DeFeo. So all of a sudden, that insanity defense that he was just improvising and freewheeling during the trial now can look better, because now it looks like the next people that lived in the house had problems. And maybe had they not fled, would have resulted in the same tragic ending with someone in the house, in that case, George Lutz, being driven to murder his family. So what Weber is doing is not just trying to profit. Like, if this works, if according to Weber, he's going to get DeFeo a new trial, which may get him a lighter sentence, released, whatever. And Weber never has a doubt in his mind that DeFeo did it. Like, he knows this guy murdered his family, but he is willing to he's willing to be instrumental in creating this hoax with the goal that might get this guy who murdered his family his freedom that he does not deserve. That is insidious.
Well, I'll humbly submit this, Matt, and you probably thought of this. It's still financial.
It's still financial.
Because if he gets DeFeo off, Weber becomes a even more famous defense attorney.
Right.
Who can actually
it's all self-aggrandizing
rates for clients. And so I think when we're looking at the layering of this, it really goes down to financial and fame, no matter what side of the Amityville Horror we're on.
But it also shows you the compromises that people are willing to make of their own, like, let's just call it integrity. I don't think that word applies to Weber or George, because even George and Kathy Lutz, like, yes, they have to know that's like, they're working directly with Weber. So even if they don't want to admit it to themselves, they have to, somewhere in the back of their heads, know that if this all works, this guy that actually committed this horrific crime and murdered his entire family is going to be redeemed or seen as like a victim himself and not the cold-blooded murderer that he is. And that, to me, shows you how corrupting, like, hoaxing can be.
It's amazing. The thread seems to be Dick Locke, Andrew Gonzoli, and William Weber, right? Yeah. And we're talking about, and the people around them that aren't afraid to lie, hoax, fake, monetize, and metastasize whatever hoax or fakery that they've identified and joined in, perpetuated. And I just find it amazing that when we're talking about, even today, all the things that we're dealing with conspiracy theorists and the bizarre belief systems that we have, I guess it should not be all that shocking that when we identify these things, that it goes back to these two words: people lie.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to go to the sourcing and the data and the facts in order to identify those lies. And again, I think that's why it's so important what we're doing is we're going back to the self-identification of these individuals. If you think about it, we don't have to surmise anything. We know they're faked because they said it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's provable. And that's what's so amazing about this. But it doesn't matter what we're doing here, Matt, to a majority of the individuals in this country. Why? Because when you're talking about bat people on the moon or extraterrestrial beings, when you're talking about Bigfoot and you're talking about ghosts or some type of poltergeist activity, those things have been memed into the American psyche.
Yeah.
They actually are here. They're real to people. And that's the fight that we have over and over again when we come to things more important, like January 6th, or more important, about, people that actually enact in violence based on fantasy. How do we stop that? Even if we can prove things are hoaxes or falses, I think that's the challenge we have in America today.
Yeah. You know who I'd like to hear from? The sun to my moon, Doug.
Oh, well, speaking of the sun, Matt.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know the Sun was actually purchased, is a London newspaper that was purchased in 1969 by one Rupert Murdoch.
The same Sun, the New York one?
The London Sun.
Oh, the
and
London
turned into a tabloid, an infamous tabloid.
Yes. I mean, yes, I know that one.
As in the same, like the tabloid that used to tap into people's phones.
Yes.
Yeah. So
the issue, when you're talking about Murdoch too, I don't know, Doug, and I know you did it purposely, which is pretty cool. Listen, guys, when you get hit with Bigfoot erotica from the media, that's absolutely untrue. You start to see, how the underbelly works, because I had never been involved with that until that happened to me. Talking about Murdoch, what a segue, because we just talked about the media being complicit. When you're talking about the books from which you just talked about Amityville Horror, you're talking about the center portion of Bigfoot and Andrew, right? Our boy, Galenko, or, so I think was his last name. Every time I look at it, I don't know why I can't.
Well, you didn't have your chat. You didn't have your chat open. It was Andrew. Yeah, I put it there for you.
Yeah, Andrew Gonzoli. Sorry, I didn't. But so when you have Murdoch, when you're talking about the Sun, which you just talked about, Doug, when you're talking about Andrew Gonzoli and the Humboldt Times, when you're talking about Dick Locke, going all the way back to the Sun newspaper in 1835, or you're talking about William Weber or the author of the Amityville Horror, it's pretty amazing to me, sort of the thread that we had also of media, right, and their ability to perpetuate this also. We have the people that are bad actors. Yeah. But the media is also an equal bad actor if they're not sourcing correctly.
You know what? And with the Amityville stuff, we can loop in a couple other, we could put a couple other people on blast. Good Housekeeping is actually the home to the first article ever written about the Lutz's story. That was actually written by the guy, Steve Hoffman, who Weber roped in. So like the first person that even like publicly like makes something known is that original author, who again also then got embroiled in suit and countersuit with the Lutzes because they thought he was basically stepping on their reveal of the book. So we got a place like Good Housekeeping ends up.
You're putting Good Housekeeping on blast?
I am.
Yeah, well,
because they published we lived in a demon haunted house.
The same thread of thought that you guys put together in the very, very beginning about plausible deniability, right? Yeah. On behalf of the media, right? This is how Fox News got away with Seth Rich, because Newt Gingrich didn't just say it, on Fox and Friends. He was quoting a published blog.
Yes.
So, and this is how that ecosystem now works, right? From your Breitbart to your, the Grudge Report, and they will come up with a story that they can each quote from each other until it works up into what people like Tim Miller called the big leagues, right? In his book, right? Like, so you can come up with one of these crazy stories, and Frank Luntz can put it on his blog, or it could be on the Grudge Report, and it can and you can mirror these all the way up to Newsmax, OAN, and then eventually Fox, right? So that's how that operated under the same thing, under the same sort of Sun strategy, if you will.
Yeah, it's
the original. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's one of the most effective, I think, financial self-licking ice cream cones you can have, right? If you're talking about, pushing hoaxes or pushing fantasy or pushing lies about an opponent, pushing things that are outlandish, you can say, well, we got it from this source, even though the source is so absolutely faked. The source is questionable. You actually can't officially source it. You're getting it from 3 different sources, said Denver Riggleman likes to engage in Bigfoot erotica. Well, it's actually one source and 2 friends. I know how it works. I know how you actually can. I've been told by a reporter how to artificially expand sources to make it sound like it's more than one person, which is, I've learned a lot. Yeah. And I think people really need to understand that just because the media is reporting something, it's sad. You have to actually source the media you trust based on the way that they source.
And let me add something right there really quick, because something that is really important about what the Sun did with their series of articles, again, that they claimed that they were just reprinting from a reputable journal. Well, other papers, once the Sun started reporting this, other papers started reporting on what the Sun was doing, thereby magnifying it. So they were also trying to get in on the whole like clickbait aspect, like come to the, some of the other daily newspapers and read about the moon people. But they get their little deniability by saying, well, we're just reporting what the Sun is reporting.
This is how it works. This is the ecosystem we're in. And I think social media and alternate media has expanded that challenge for everyone, because there is no 100% answer on if what you're reading is true, even in media today, sadly.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to a really fun segment, so we can just sort of end on a very fun note. Because, we talk a lot about, grifter weasels and your performative culture war minstrels. And we like to have fun talking about them directly, if you will, in a new segment called Vomit Monster of the Week. Matt, who's your vomit monster this week?
Noted son of JFK assassin, Ted Cruz.
Yes.
Yes. Ted Cruz is my vomit monster. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just look at him. He kind of looks like the vomit monster, but also because he's just a performative jerk that has no business actually trying to be in the Senate or do anything serious. He picked up a random quote about like limiting how many beers Americans should have, not a policy, not anything that is supposedly going to happen. This was just a statement about someone or from someone that's saying maybe we should adopt Canada's model or whatever. And he decided to go into like the manliest bar that he could find, surround himself with people holding beers that are clearly unopened, which seems very odd. And he rants in only the way Ted Cruz can, which sounds vaguely serial killer-ish. He's not. And he reaches off to the side and pulls up a beer and decides to tell the government to kiss his ass because they.
Oh, so he falsely attributed the quote to someone in government or the left or something like that.
Right. Yeah. He made it sound like it was a policy coming from the Biden administration, which it's not.
Using a 2-beer health recommendation to own the libs.
Exactly. And again, what is this kind of setting? This manly man bar with a bunch of people holding beers. If you're not just about to count off like what looks like a musical number, because it's like you could see them all setting up and it's like he says the word ass and then it's like on 1, on 2, on 3, and in unison they all crack open their beers and take a big swig. And it is the lamest thing that I've seen in a long time. And I hate Ted Cruz.
Wow. What was the word? The trigger word?
Which was the trigger word?
Before the countdown. Ask?
I think it was ask, because I think it was kiss my ass.
Oh, ass. ASS.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No.
Ass trigger.
It was an ass trigger. We have a dick lock and an ass trigger in this episode.
All right, so we're going to go to Denver. Who is your vomit monster this week?
Mine's pretty quick, and it's not a surprise because you would think that you could be beyond any type of shock. But the fact that any elected representative would sit with Alex Jones, somebody like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, makes her my vomit monster of the week. And I think part of it has to do with the fact is me who thinks that being an elected representative means you shouldn't be sitting with conspiracy theorists or people who've had civil judgments about making up how children were shot at a school. I think that individual probably shouldn't be, an elected individual shouldn't be sitting with somebody like Alex Jones, a noted conspiracy theorist, charlatan, and pretty much a soulless, piece of junk. Yeah. I think that really got to me. I think the fact that she said, that there's God punishments going on at Burning Man. Now, listen, I wouldn't be caught dead at Burning Man. That's just not my scene. I think I just don't really give a rat's ass. And, I have more important things to do, like, go buy toilet paper. But I think that, when you're talking about, somebody who's talking about it's God's wrath or that climate change is a ridiculous sort of an implied deep state or globalist, I would say globalist theory to control us. You get to the point that you're so tired of the retread conspiracy theories with conspiracy theorists by elected representatives who are actually voting on legislation and supposedly serious and not. I think to the point of me as a former elected representative, professional, and somebody's taking a note to the Constitution, Marjorie Taylor Greene's an embarrassment to the United States of America, and that is my analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of think she thinks Burning Man is just Wicker Man. The way she talks about it, it's like it may be a terrible thing, but I'm pretty sure we're not in the pagan gods burning people alive thing. But
if you're into wearing funky clothes, going to Burning Man and some kind of bohemian, I don't know, and I don't really care. I just don't care.
Just blame the millennials, and we're good.
I just use that's all we ask. Just use soap.
Yeah. But to say that it's somehow attributable to Baal, the god, and I said Baal like Bowel instead of Baal, Baal, but to be attributed to that, it's just you get to the point and you're like, stop. It's so ridiculous, and so many people believe it. So that's my vomit monster, my friend Doug.
Okay.
And who's yours, by the way?
Yes.
Doug.
We need to know yours. I'm keeping mine local, right? No. So because this time it's personal, right? We got a 2021 mayoral candidate and WABC talk show host, Curtis Sliwa. Now, he was that sort of grifty monster, like back when like Betty Davis Eyes was on the radio, right? Like he was this, like before what you have now, like your Matt Gaetzes and your Marjorie Taylor Greenes. He was doing it a long time ago. Right? Do you remember the Guardian Angels?
I do.
And they were like these fake group of people that get on the train and pretend to be like, trained in the martial arts. And right?
The Guardian Angels were vigilantes, right, Doug?
Yeah. Like this, it was the thing that made Batman plausible, right? Like that citizen, because they were practically endorsed by like Mario Cuomo and Ed Koch after a while, who criticized him at first, came around somehow. Yes. So, and then they would get caught in these hoaxes, right? Like these little like fake attacks. And then they'd go away for like a summer, then come back like that never happened. And our media just went along with it. Like the Guardian Angels are back. Like last summer, Lisa Sliwa didn't have a neck brace and claimed to be attacked by people. But anyway, Curtis Sliwa in the last 2 weeks has been arrested 3 times in these immigration protests. Now that's an issue that is debatable, fair points on both sides, but these are protests he helped stage and organize, but didn't think to get a permit for. So he was arrested quite intentionally in front of cameras 3 times in the past 2 weeks. So he's back at it with a vengeance, Mr. Sliwa. Now, he's also very popular because he likes to stoke a lot of fires. So as you can imagine, he's very popular in places like Staten Island. And if you've never been to Staten Island, picture New Jersey's taint. And imagine an island of people made of vape pens. I mean, there's a few nice ones. Vape pens, but that's his audience.
That's amazing to me.
But
that's amazing.
So yes, that is my vomit monster of the week, Curtis Sliwa.
Well, I tell you, I think what we've learned here, guys, are grifters going to grift. People are going to lie. right? And the crazy is going to crazy. And it's hard to out crazy them. Their energy's so high. They have high energy levels when you're insane. Or when you know that the cynicism is working or that power play is working to play on the ignorance of others. And you know, the fact is that, you know, what did we say at the beginning? What did I say? Is that a hoax is fake unless you're Marjorie Taylor Greene? Is that
right?
Was that the quote? And you know that Matt stole Matt. Damn it. But no, it was fantastic. So anyway, this I think is why this episode is pretty interesting, that we could cover. Jesus Christ, guys, we covered extraterrestrial, Bigfoot, and ghosts, and the hoax. You know, the hoax machine on each one of those, all in one episode.
It's a sampler platter episode, but in a good way. And I want to add one thing to what you were saying, though, is like one of the reasons I think one of the reasons some of this stuff is so hard to combat is kind of what you said earlier, Denver, which is like, unfortunately, we are put in the position of having to be the Santa isn't real show. So they have entertainment value just inherent in the kinds of stories they tell on their side, right? They get to describe the world as like a movie that they get to put themselves in as a main character, and we have to be the ones sitting outside going like, yeah, but that didn't happen. We're buzzkills, but
you're so right.
It's very necessary.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, and that makes it hard to combat, because who would you rather be? The person that's like facing down demons in your house and like being strong, or do you want to be the person criticizing that?
Yeah, that sounds infinitely more fun.
Yeah, I think when you find out that Santa Claus is just the guy that your mom sleeps with, things aren't quite as exciting, and they're a little gross. And, you know, that's, I think, part of the issue.
You know, or Santa Claus is your mom.
Look, I'll just have you know that my mom only
could be
Santa Claus. Hi, Mom. And on that note, thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yeah, I thank you guys. What another great show. Thank you, Doug. And Santa Claus isn't real.
And but we're real. We'll see you next week.
On the mighty peculiar.
On strange. On strange.